there's the person whose uncle lives in a rural village, and that rural village gets certain basic meds delivered to the clinic, but there's something that he needs that the system
chronic med,
or particular version of
so you can't have veterinary care or something else or whatever.
So and he's being supported by somebody else who's willing to pay the private system to be able to look after him. So also understanding the interconnections, the way money flows between urban areas and rural areas.
And also family structures, right? Structures. So it's like, I'm willing to pay health insurance for someone else. I won't buy it for myself, but I'll buy it for someone else because I'm responsible for them. Which, when you are a high-income person, it's like, well, why would you buy health insurance for someone else? Like, they should afford it themselves. You know, it's like it's a different way of thinking about family structures and communities.
Yes, and you don't even realize that you have like limiting assumptions about how the world works.
Yes,
until you get out there and do the field work and speak to people. And
which, I mean, even on a basic level, I'm thinking about someone who wants to buy a product for their uncle. Like, when we design healthcare products, when we define a dependent, it's generally your partner and your child. And it's saying, okay, but a dependent doesn't fit just within that definition. A dependent can be someone who is not even sharing blood with you, but actually depends on you for some sort of income or provision, and understanding that that's normal and fine. And it isn't fraudulent, and it isn't like someone trying to like dupe the system or whatever. It's just actually how it works and how it plays out.
Yes, absolutely. And we see it all over financial services. I mean, my husband and I pay, like, some premiums go off my bank account, some go off his bank account. And it's always amazing to me that in companies aren't able to link the data to show that we're a household and actually we share risk. And, it just isn't there. Actually. There isn't.
And it's not consumer centric. Because it's very frustrating when someone won't give you preferential terms. When you're like, if you looked at my financial sort of situation holistically, you'd actually see that this is being managed well, but you're saying you won't give me, reduced interest rate because I don't have a certain amount of investment with you.
Yes.
And it's like, well, somewhere else, I still have it or whatever. Like, it's not like I'm not looking out for myself, but it is interesting. And I think that there's a challenge there across the financial sector to actually see people more holistically and not just as the data and profit that they represent to you.
Yeah. And actually that you would... I think often there are these win-win solutions where you do better for the customer, but actually you do better for you as the company as well, because, in having, you actually have a fuller view of risk. Yeah. You have more information, you're able to price your products better, your clients will be more loyal. Because
from a pure actuarial perspective,
yes.
if you tailor a product to a specific person, their persistency rates are likely to be higher because they feel cared for in their specific scenario.
Completely.
So it's a no-brainer from that perspective, which I always think is funny because it's seen as separate. And I'm like, but if you look after a need, I always say it to my students, I'm like, financial products, if they do not meet a need, are rubbish.
Yes.
And I said, so as an actuary, the better you understand people, the better your products can be. And sometimes I see these students look at me and they're like, yeah, no, it's just about the numbers. And I'm like, it's not about the numbers. It's about the people.
Yes. But understanding how, so understanding both is really powerful.
Yes.
And that should ultimately be that's the ultimate superpower, right?
Agreed.
To have this attunement to the world, to people, to how things work, and to have the pragmatism and the kind of intuitions around numbers. So to make sure that you can build things that are sustainable. So that kind of then leads on to the next career piece. So,
let's hear it.
So I had an interest in the end of life from the time that I was an academic at UCT.
Yeah, and that was actually the paper I presented on, end of costs in the last year of life. You'd done a paper on that. It was eye-opening for me because I hadn't engaged with that magnitude of claims.
Yes.
And seeing, that claims curve where you sort of like that first year of life and that last year of life. And I was like, surely this can't be right.
No, it's absolutely astounding how much of healthcare expenditure is concentrated right at the end of life. And then I was so when we'd done the research with the students when I was at TCT, we saw enormous amounts of money, 20 billion rand that is being spent in this last period of life. What I was struggling to reconcile it with was my personal experience. So my mom's sister had cancer and she died in the private healthcare system.
Okay.
And I saw the wasting of resources. Mm. So, the care that should didn't actually want to be in hospital, didn't want to be getting the sort of extra care.
Yes.
And so actually care is not the right word, extra services, extra interventions.
Yes.
Which are not necessarily care.
Yes.
Yes, we're trying to reconcile, hang on, we spend all this money, but I'm not sure we're delivering the end-of-life experience that people actually want.
Yes.
So that question had been sort of in the back of my mind, probably from about 2011 or so.
Okay.
And then a few months after we started Percept, I met with a palliative care doctor.
For our audience, can you just explain what palliative
Yes.
means? I don't think everyone is necessarily familiar with that word.
So palliative means essentially an extra layer of support that is not oriented towards curing a patient.
Yeah.
So if you think about a patient who is chronically ill, so somebody who has, we differentiate between acute and chronic. So an acute episode is something like the flu, for example, where you in
a very bad case, but
sick for a while and then you recover and you carry on with your life. Chronic is something that you live with for the rest of your life. So you're not going to be cured from it. Right? So there's a need for somebody to think about the quality of your life and what extra support do you need to be able to live with this condition. So how, if you're taking multiple medicines, how do they interact with each other?
Yes.
Is there something that, that outside of the clinical space that the doctors aren't thinking about? Like changes to diet, for example.
Yes. Or like your exercise, sleep, those sort of things.
So palliative doctors end up working quite a lot. They don't only work at the end of life, but they work quite a lot at the end of life.
Yes.
Because the questions of curative care begin to fall away.
As you realize that actually you're not going to recover. You're heading towards the end point.
So then in a curative system where that's the emphasis, people kind of either keep pretending like they can cure you, so they keep throwing things at you.
Beds and
why don't we try this third line chemo and let's do a surgery and all kinds of things, or then throw up their hands and abandon you.
Yes.
So those tend to be the two experiences: over intervention and abandonment.
Yeah.
But there's another way, which is where you kind of journey alongside the person. And make sure that their pain is being relieved, that you're dealing with symptoms like things like nausea.
You're basically improving their quality of life without extending their life.
Absolutely. And the ethos is living the best possible life until the very end.
Yes.
So that somebody who... And it comes back to
maintaining dignity.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And also agency to a degree, where it's saying, I know that I'm going to die, but in that process, I want to be able to make decisions that I find most conducive to me and make me comfortable. So if I don't want to be in a hospital, then I shouldn't be made to be in a hospital.
100%. So this area of work, this kind of next chapter of my life, really brought me closer to that absolute respect for patients, being able to express what it is that their preferences are, and actually finding ways for the system to respect that. And being so powerful, and being so shocked actually repeatedly at the systematic disrespect that we have for people's preferences.
Well, there's a belief in healthcare, I think, that the patient has no information, in the sense that there is an information asymmetry in the healthcare sector, where like a healthcare provider does know a lot more about the body than your average patient does. But the patient is the one who is living in the body.
Yes.
And so they have to listen to them.
Yes, so the doctor knows more about bodies in general.
But not that body.
But not the lived experience of being inside my body with my condition right now.
Exactly.
So the disregard. So it again comes to questions, and this is one of the repeated themes across my career, is engaging with questions of hierarchy. So, where we have these powered setups where we assume that one person knows more than another person knows less, or one person is worth more than another person is worth less.
Or one person knows better,
yes,
and another person doesn't.
Yes. So, and the detrimental ways in which that plays out. So it plays out in the money thing, right? Yeah. So like I, as a rich person, am worth more than a poor person.
Exactly.
It plays out in the classroom. As the teacher, lecturer, don't need to treat you with respect. I don't recognize that you as a student come with kind of innate knowing and wisdom of your own and lived experience of your own. I, as the actuary, don't need to understand what the customer needs. I know what the customer needs.
Yeah.
I, as the doctor, don't need to pay attention to what the patient's preferences are. So these are all examples, actually, of the same thing. They just play out in different ways.
Yeah.
And most of my work has been when you start to thread it all together and you think, oh gosh, this woman was a health actuary, and then she was an academic, and then she was a kind of serial entrepreneur, and now she's a meditation teacher. It actually kind of makes sense when you look at it through that lens, and to say, actually, all of these different places, I've been working with dismantling
Power dynamics.
Yeah. And systemic ways in which there is more than and less than.
Yeah.
And bringing, kind of bringing those things together. So the works I met Linda, turned out that we both had this, I don't even want to say question. It wasn't a question of like, can we do better? It was like a knowing that like, surely,
let's do better.
Surely there's a win-win-win here where we can do better for the patients, better for...
And sorry, Linda was
the palliative doctor.
The palliative doctor with me.
Yes.
Okay.
So she, so we both had this belief that we could save the medical scheme's money and do better for the patient, and actually this kind of emerging...
So holistic value.
Yeah, for everybody. That nobody would lose in this setup. So then Aligned, so Perceptor was formed in 2017, and Aligned was formed in 2018.
Literally a serial entrepreneur.
I really didn't plan for it to be that way, but that is how it's been. And there's been actually an entity that has been built every year since then. And then a beautiful, a very generative, beautiful period of my career of creation and birthing these organizations. Very fertile period. And,
love it.
Yeah, and build, and each of them actually thinking very deeply about organizational culture, ways of work, ways of being. So how do we build, and then the solutions that we actually build in the work. So through the advisory firm, working on a wide range of problems, but getting to think very deeply about, working with National Treasury, for example, and thinking about how you allocate the budget across provinces in a way that's more equitable.
Sure.
So many interesting questions over the years. And then in Aligned, which was the second company, we started with this question of working quite systematically across the whole sort of patient's journey, and each kind of understanding each pain point and figuring out whether we could reorganize the system and the incentives in the system. So it brought together like the understanding of financial incentives, understanding of money. How does money flow? What are the perverse incentives? How do we reorganize those incentives? The clinical understanding of how care is actually delivered, and how you do better when you work in teams. So how do we actually create and enable teams? So instead of an oncologist and working on a cancer patient and then a surgeon working separately, and there's no palliative person involved, how do you actually get them working together and actually bring in a social worker, because there's a social aspect to it. If there's a dietitian needed, how do you bring a dietitian in? But also understanding the medical scheme environment. So going back to
who's paying for it,
to my technical experience from the first 3 years of my career, I know all the weaves together. Like how does benefit design work? How do you make it so that the medical scheme is comfortable that their risk is being managed? You're not exposing them to undue risk. You're not exposing the risk pool to undue risk. So really making the money aspects of it work, and the social solidarity aspects of it work, right? So like making sure that you're allocating resources in a way that's fair. Because actually what was happening in the way that the resources were being allocated is there was an over-allocation to the end of life at the expense of being able to invest in other interventions.
Like preventative interventions.
Absolutely, right? So if you can
free up where healthcare has to be going.
Absolutely. So if you can free up resources from there without detracting from patient outcomes. In fact, adding to patient outcomes, because it turns out the vast majority of patients would rather die at home. Don't actually want to be in a... So what happened before we intervened is 70% of patients were dying
in hospital.
The majority of those were dying in ICU. So not just...
Which is a massive expense.
but also so unpleasant, like beeping machines and
the visiting hours are specific, and only so many people can come in. So if you have a big family, they have to now set up a schedule so they can see you in a given time or whatever, and it's not ideal.
And again, thinking about cultural and spiritual aspects, right? So I know in my family of origin, to be able